I did my project over the Warren Court, Oliver Brown versus Board of Education. Segregation in school and public places was a problem back in 1896 when the Plessy versus Ferguson case was introduced, which ruled that blacks and whites are separate but equal in all schools and public buildings. In the early 1950s, several black men challenged this practice in the Supreme Court. Oliver Brown from Topeka, Kansas was the most famous out of the parents when he tried to enroll his daughter into a local white-only school. The case ruled that segregation was unconstitutional in school. Segregation in schools had been around since the 1800s, and it had finally come to an end. Plessy versus Ferguson started it, but Brown versus Board of Education ended it. Brown versus the Board of Education was the biggest case having to do with segregation in schools. Ernesto Miranda versus the State of Arizona. At his home in Phoenix, Arizona, Miranda was arrested under the charges of kidnapping and rape. After 2 harsh hours of questioning, he signed off a confession and was later convicted for rape and kidnapping. During the case, he had said he was never given the right to remain silent and the right to have a lawyer present. All the confessions were made unconstitutional and should be excluded from the trial. All evidence that was found unconstitutionally was therefore excluded from the trial. He was later asked if he was read his rights. Under law, you have to be read your rights. He had not been told his rights, but he was still sentenced to a year and a day in federal prison for taking a vehicle over state lines. Mapp versus Ohio. In Ohio, police officers broke into Dolly Mapp's home with a search warrant, therefore breaking the law. All the police officers had against her was a tip that connected her to a recent bombing. After she refused to allow them in, she was arrested and her house was searched, and they found obscene materials for possession and was later convicted. The state of Ohio argued that even though the search was made without a warrant, that the state was allowed to use the evidence they possessed in the legal search. The decision was made by Justice Tom Clark and stated, "We hold that all evidence obtained by searches and seizures in violation of the Constitution is by that same authority inadmissible in the state court." It also ruled that evidence found in illegal searches are not allowed in court or to prosecute a defendant. Gideon versus Wainwright. In June 1961, Clarence Gideon was arrested under the charge of stealing beer, coke, and money from a cigarette machine, although he stated he was innocent. The judge in the case stated that he could not give counsel to defend Gideon in the case. With the denial of giving Gideon a counsel, the case continued, leaving Gideon unable to adequately represent himself in court. In the case, U.S. Supreme Court came to the decision that states are required to provide legal counsel for indigent defendants regardless of the degree of crime they are accused of. While Gideon wasn't provided a legal counsel, he was convicted and sentenced to 5 years in prison. At the time Gideon was sentenced, the Sixth Amendment right to a counsel was only in federal and state cases. In the case, the U.S. Supreme Court came to the decision that states are required to provide legal counsel for indigent defendants regardless of the degree of crime they're accused of. Escobedo versus Illinois. On January 19, 1960, Daniel Escobedo was arrested for a warrant and interrogated by police about the fatal shooting of his brother-in-law. Escobedo had not told anything to the police about the shooting. He was released the following afternoon on a writ of habeas corpus drafted by his retaining attorney, Warren Wolfson, saying he being held without a charge. 11 days later, Benedict, an acquaintance of Escobedo, was taken into custody and told the police that Escobedo had fired the fatal shots into the murder of his brother-in-law. The police arrested Escobedo again and was asked to confess to the crime, and he asked for an attorney. This caused a confrontation with Benedict and Escobedo. Escobedo claimed that Benedict was the one that killed his brother-in-law. Escobedo was denied his rights for a lawyer, and by the 6th and 14th Amendment, it was ruled unconstitutional.